Good evening and welcome to another edition of You and Your Money. I'm Brian Hurst. This evening we are focusing on short-term insurance. There is no doubt that many people view their short-term insurance premiums as what we call a grudge purchase. There's also a common perception that submitting a claim will inevitably lead to frustration and delays in getting it settled. Some may recall IGR's well-known motto from the 70s, "We don't hassle, we pay claims." And over the time, this slogan was jokingly twisted into "we do hassle and we don't pay claims." However, this perception should be dispelled. Over the years, the establishment and evolution of the National Financial Ombud Scheme, which now deals with both short-term and long-term insurance disputes, has significantly improved fairness and accountability within the industry. And joining me this evening, great to have Edite Teixeira-McKinon, lead Ombud of the Non-Life Insurance Division of the National Financial Ombud Scheme, South Africa. Edite, good to have you on the show once again. We're coming to the end of the year. Can you believe it's already November? Since we last chatted in June, just give me some information. Firstly, I just want to first deal with first-time viewers. Many of our viewers who are regulars know about the Ombud's office, but just for our first-time viewers, just give us a brief update and understanding of what your office does and how it helps disgruntled claimants.
So our office deals with complaints by complainants against financial institutions. We act as an independent alternative dispute resolution forum, providing services to try and resolve complaints that complainants haven't been able to resolve, or consumers haven't been able to resolve directly with their financial institutions. So we always encourage consumers to approach their financial institution if they've got an issue, to try and resolve the issue first. But if they can't, then they're welcome to approach us. Our services are free to consumers, and the financial institution pays the case fee that is levied against them.
What's the last quarter like in terms of recovery for individuals who were disgruntled and felt that claims had been settled, and maybe just for the year so far?
So the NFO as a whole has almost recovered the same amount that they recovered or put back into the pockets of consumers that approached us for assistance, which is approaching around 300 million rand that the NFO has been able to assist consumers with. Obviously, those are not edited or not audited at this stage, but that's the unofficial recovered figure year to date.
That's an enormous amount of money where you think that individuals had claims weren't settled, came to your office, and that's only a percentage of totals repudiated by insurers. What sort of percentage is that?
I think we receive less than 10% of complaints in the industry across all the financial sectors. So the majority of complaints go directly to the financial institutions to resolve, and around 10% of all complaints in the industry then end up at the Ombudsman's office. So we really are just a very small percentage of complaints that the industry deals with.
Edite, can you categorize any in particular, any maybe two or three that are glaring?
So in the non-life division, the short-term insurance area, what we're seeing more of are homeowners or complaints related to homeowners insurance, and a decline in complaints related to motor vehicle insurance. So that's a very interesting change for us. Traditionally, motor vehicle insurance complaints constitute around 50% of all these complaints, but since COVID, motor vehicle insurance complaints have been on the decline and homeowners insurance complaints have been on the increase. And that's the latter obviously related to climate change events, storms, tornadoes, just weather-related incidences that have become more prevalent in South Africa, more frequent and more severe incidents leading to claims.
And I would imagine on the homeowner's side, that's because lack of maintenance on property.
So it's a combination of, yes, an insured peril did take place. There was a storm, but not all the damage. Once the insurer investigates and assesses the claim, there's a lot of dissatisfaction from consumers around the fact that not all the damage is then going to be covered by the insurer, because they've been able to determine through expert assessment and reports that not all the damage was caused as a result of the storm. Definitely aspects of maintenance or lack of maintenance, damage that has occurred gradually that hasn't been attended to by policyholders. So that's where the dissatisfaction comes in. Then our job is to really analyze, is the insurer correct in either rejecting the entire claim or a portion of that claim?
I would imagine that underinsurance must also play a part in your house owners, particularly where one has a bond with a financial institution and maybe isn't keeping up to date with current values of replacement.
Correct, and that's usually when there's a total loss, right? And then you look at what the sum insured is, what is the property insured for, what is the actual replacement value of that property, and we see a lot of cases where people are unhappy because the insurer is now only paying a portion of the claim as opposed to the entire claim, and they apply what is called average to that claim.
Because, if you think about the market, particularly in Johannesburg and other parts other than the Cape, maybe in Schlanga and places like that, property prices have been falling all the time. But that's not the price you must insure your home for, not the fact that there's a market price. Exactly what will it cost to replace? And they always talk about including fixtures and fittings. And sometimes fixtures and fittings can play a very big, significant part.
Absolutely, and a lot of people also rely on the municipal value of their property to benchmark the sum insured against that, and that's usually undervalued. It really is, how much is it going to cost to build my house from scratch, and that's the value that one needs to insure for.
And we talk about insurance for the catastrophe.
Exactly.
Insuring your home is catastrophe.
Yes.
You lose a laptop or a cell phone, not a pleasant event, but it's not a catastrophe.
No.
But your house burns down, it is a catastrophe. So let's just understand, every insurance office has an Ombud office, I would imagine. Most of them do. Why do they think so differently to you when it comes to a claim? How come they can't solve the dispute? It gets referred to you, and then you making recommendations, which I would imagine many of them accept.
So in the short-term insurance industry, it has been a requirement for many years now that each financial institution have what they refer to as an escalation process for complaints. They're not actually allowed to be called ombuds. Only office that can be called ombuds, with ombuds working and making decisions, is a recognized financial ombud scheme as recognized by the Ombud Council, but they're supposed to have alternative dispute forums or processes built into their claims process. So most of the members of our office do. Obviously, fairness and equity is not always easy to understand. And unless you've worked in an ombuds environment and you've got that experience, you're not always going to be able to understand and apply that. It could also be the fact that they don't have the mandate to apply fairness when they're making decisions, especially at claim stage. And only once it gets escalated further up do elements of fairness and equity come into play. We have seen that most members of our office have tried to apply fairness and equity apart from the contract to decisions, and a lot of the times they have made the right decision. The complainant, the consumer, is the one that's still not happy and then refers it to our office. So it's not as if insurers get it wrong all the time. In fact, in the main, their decisions are correct. It's about 20% of cases where we can come to the assistance of the consumer and find in their favor, either wholly or in part.
Well, you mentioned a figure of 300 million.
Yes.
And now you're mentioning 20%.
Yes. So 20% in favor of complainants translates to a recovered amount of around 300 million.
So that's a lot of claims unpaid. And that's why you hear
Disputed.
consumers
Yes.
being often so disgruntled.
Yes.
Talk to me about, one of the stumbling blocks, obviously, I would imagine, is proof of ownership.
Yes.
Is that now become a big play? I mean, I'm seeing all these comments in the press, proof of ownerships, warranties, all these things. Let's just talk about, firstly, proof of ownership.
So what complainants or what policyholders, insureds don't often realize is it's not just a case of, I've had a loss, the insurer must now settle. As with any claim, you have to prove your loss and the quantum of your loss. Now, in some cases, the industry assists consumers, assists the policyholder by appointing assessors, loss adjusters to quantify. But ultimately, it is the policyholder's responsibility to prove not only that they've had a loss or damage, but what is that loss? How much is it? And it becomes quite tricky when you're dealing with with household contents, with jewelry, out of home items or risks items. People don't keep proof, they don't keep a paper trail, although nowadays this is becoming easier. A lot of stuff can be stored electronically, so you don't have invoices that fade with time, that become illegible at claim stage. But ultimately, it is the policyholder, it is the insured's responsibility to prove their claim. And there's no obligation on an insurer to assist, but in a lot of cases, for example, motor vehicle claims, they will send out an assessor to assess the damages, and they do provide that service to policyholders.
Edite, are you getting problems? You said motors dropped off complaints, but are you getting problems where insurers want to write off cars at close to what they consider write-off value, whereas if you think about it, to an older person, the value of that car, rather than replacing it. I mean, I've got clients who are driving in the 80s. As a matter of fact, a client of mine of 95 is so excited. She just bought a new car and she got a 7-year warranty. Lovely to hear. So, but I mean, that could be a problem, couldn't it be? Because I don't want my car written off because it's so valuable to me, and to go and replace it cost me a few R100,000 more.
So a lot of the quantum disputes.
Okay, we're going to have to deal with that. We're going to have to take a break. I see in the background my producer letting me know. Stay tuned. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back to New Money. This evening we're discussing short-term insurance. My guest, Edite Teixeira-McKinon. And if you'd like to email, you can send your email. Inquiries will appear on the screen. Edite, we talk about an older person, older car, lost them to get from home to the shops and back, write-off. Right? Companies writing off at much lower values.
Yeah, a lot of our quantum disputes or unhappiness from consumers is that they don't want their vehicle written off. I guess it talks to our quite tough economic environment where consumers know that whatever they're going to be paid for the write-off is not going to be sufficient to replace to replace the vehicle with something similar. It's probably going to cost more. So although the settlement will be based on the value of the vehicle, whatever you've insured, market, retail, at the time of the loss, it's still not going to be sufficient, to cover them for exactly the same vehicle, especially when you've got an excess to pay and there may be other costs financially. So a lot of consumers come to us not wanting their vehicles written off, and we try to mediate, between the insured and the insurer and see if they can accommodate such situation, although the insurer ultimately has the right to decide how to settle a claim.
But you always have the right to accept money in lieu of settlement.
Yes, you do.
And then obviously do the repairs yourself. Yes. But then you've got to make sure that once you've done that, you can still get the insurance. You can't drive without insurance.
Exactly. The risk is that you're probably going to go to a panel beater that will charge you less. but there may be problems with the quality of the repair work. Whereas if the insurer, if it's not a write-off and the insurer wants to repair, my advice is allow the insurer to choose the repairer, allow the insurer to repair and pay for those repairs directly to the panel beater. Because if there are any comebacks, you can go to the insurer. You can look to the insurer to rectify and not have to deal with the panel beater directly.
Let's just talk about one thing that's very overlooked, people not always realizing what warranties they have in their policy.
Yes, especially around...
And that's critical, isn't it?
Yes, security measures that have to be in place for there to be cover. I can think of, in motor vehicle insurance, tracking devices that have to be active and working at all times. So you've got to ensure that they are in a working condition, that you pay your subscription fees, failing which at the time of the theft or the burglary, you may find yourself without any cover. The same with alarm systems in your home that have to be in working order. They need to be tested. Some of them require logging, records so that the insurer can see whether you typically do arm your alarm when you're not in the home. And again, the same issues, otherwise no theft or burglary cover.
And that can be catastrophic, really.
Catastrophic.
It can, those warranties. I've got other questions, but I'd like to get to some emails, because when I leave the program and they say, you didn't get to my email. So Peter in Honeydew, I have had a problem with a claim due to load shedding. Insurers have told me that new conditions were implemented. Who must prove that I received such notification?
So it's not a question of whether you receive, it's a question of the insurer proving that it sent you notice of any change to the policy terms and conditions. They have 31 days to give you notice of any changes before implementing those changes and before those changes become effective. An insurer who fails to do that, in our office, we'll say, well, then you can't apply the new provision or the new term to the insured's claim. It's not a question of proving that you received it, it's a question of proving that they sent you notification to your preferred method of communication. So if they can show us email address is what you gave them, or cell phone number, then they're basically off the hook, provided they've given you proper notice, 31 days.
Edith, I think of my first lecture in legal theory, and that's going back some years. Does the post office act as the agent for the person receiving, or for the agent for the person who's sending out the notification?
It's probably sending.
Yeah, because today, we don't have a postal system.
No.
So
most communication is via email, very little by post or even by fax anymore.
Yeah. So maybe just a note to viewers, please, if it's important that you communicate with your insurance companies, giving them an email address. So if there's anything that they need to communicate with you, you can't afterwards say, well, I'm not receiving a postal address. Joanne in Pretoria said, is it fair for insurers to repudiate a claim because of late notification when they've not been prejudiced? I think about someone with a holiday home, hasn't been to their holiday home, pitches up 6 months later, or things like that. I mean, the concept about late notification, is that a big play in your lives?
We do see it, absolutely, and then we need to look at the circumstances of the loss. How did it occur? Was it a holiday home? How long had the damage been ongoing? For example, a burst geyser in a holiday home can cause, a lot of damage. But again, was that disclosed to the insurer? Because ordinarily, if it is disclosed as a holiday home, the premiums will go up to cater for the very fact that these losses are not always easy and quickly. They're not always easily detected. And so it almost covers the insurer's prejudice in that regard. So we'll investigate those circumstances very carefully, look at the policy wording. The insurer will always have to show materiality of the prejudice that they suffered. If they're not able to show prejudice, then we won't easily allow an insurer to escape liability on the basis of late notification.
I think of defense of someone claiming money, prescription. Does the insurance company automatically have a deadline if you haven't claimed a repudiation on late notification?
So most policy wordings will contain a provision to say you've got to submit a claim within 30 days of your loss. Some will say 60 days, so it all depends on the contract. But apart from that provision, there's also prescription 3 years. And the whole point about bringing your claim to the insurer as soon as possible is because the evidence is there. It's easier to assess, easier to validate a claim. The longer you leave it, the more difficult it becomes, and therein lies the insurer's prejudice.
Because you said 30 days from claim,
date of loss.
but date of loss, but it may only be 90 or 120 days before you realise you've had a loss.
Exactly. So it's when you become aware of the loss. Absolutely.
Okay. Then Jules in Saxonwell said, does the insurer have the right to make any request which is not reasonable in order to validate a claim? I don't understand how long that piece of string is, but he's indicating, can they ask anything?
No, it has to be a reasonable request. And the policy provision in most policy wordings say a reasonable request. They're not allowed to request something that's totally irrelevant or appears to be irrelevant to the claim, just if they're on a fishing expedition. That is not permitted. So as long as the request is reasonable, but we again assess the reasonableness against the circumstances of the loss and the claim itself.
Then Graham in Rondebosch asks, if one receives poor service from a broker and the insurance company and the company can one complain to your office? So is service a referral to your office?
Absolutely, absolutely. We will investigate at this stage the phase Ombud that deals with intermediary services. So if it's an independent broker not tied to the insurer, we can't investigate those complaints because the phase office deals with that. But any service-related issue relating to the insurer, we will investigate. And if we find that there is maladministration, gross maladministration, in fact, we also have the jurisdiction to impose what is called a compensation award against the insurer in favour of the complainant.
Ian in Witbank says, what academic education and what experience do employees in your office have? You're all lawyers, aren't you?
The adjudicators, yes, they've got legal backgrounds. Some are admitted, others aren't. Many have experience both in law and also in the insurance industry. So that combination.
George in Niza says, I've just had a claim with the insurers who have knocked me back saying that I'm underinsured and want to reduce the claim by 30%. I disagree, as I do feel my home is insured correctly. What can I do?
Get a proper valuation by a quantity surveyor, because the insurer will have had its expert setting out in a report why they believe you're underinsured. You then need to also think of appointing an independent expert to counter that if you're going to challenge that valuation.
What people always forget is that you've got to insure new for old.
Yes.
You can't say, well, my couch is 20-year-old, it's only worth 500 Rand. You've got to say, well, what will it cost to replace that account? And that's what you've got to be insuring for. And that's often why people think they're not underinsured compared to assessment by the assessor. Patrick in Durban says, my question relates to cyber insurance. Have you had any claims referred to you, and what advice do you have regarding this form of insurance?
We have had a few already complaints. My advice is that it's quite a technical product, technical insurance product. Read your policy terms and conditions. If you don't understand exactly what is being covered or excluded, then speak to your advisor, speak to your insurer, because they're quite technical as regards what is covered and what is not covered.
I'm going to sneak one more in. It says, from Norman in Westcliff, says, am I able to claim interest on a claim that should have been settled 8 months ago, which has now been settled?
You can try. You can try, and if there's been again an unjust delay for the claim that we in our office find will be gross maladministration, then we would ask that as part of compensation. But if there is a justification for the late processing of the claim, like you haven't provided documents that you were supposed to provide, you were asked, and as a policyholder you didn't, then we wouldn't impose interest against the insurer. But there may be circumstances where we will for delayed claims payments.
Well, Edite has commented in our program this evening of the number of claims that were repudiated and have now been paid. It's so important to understand the importance of their office. However, before a claim gets to the stage, it's important that all information that is material is provided to insurers to avoid the claim giving them a problem. Insurers should also make sure that they are aware of all the terms and conditions in their policy. Rather have your policy underwritten at the time of securing the policy than having your policy underwritten at the time of claim. Edite, thank you for joining me this evening. It's important to note that our program is to provide information and should not be construed as advice. Next week's program will once again be dealing with estate planning, and if you need to get hold of me, my details will appear on the screen. Thank you for watching, and good night.